Hey everybody, and welcome to my presentation for MS 539 Programming Concepts. In this assignment, I had to write a small program that used exception handling, two different types basically, and we're going to go through that right now. But before I go through, I do have to tell you that I tried to make a different program than this one, and I was basically trying to make a thing for my record label where you can pick bands, and then if you pick the band, it would show you a message box, that had some information about the band. And if you got it wrong, then it would say, no, it doesn't. Band's not on this label, and then it's supposed to throw an exception handling. However, I couldn't get the try catch statement to work, and I tried different ways to do it, like using if statement or using a boolean to try to kick the try statement into action and stuff like that. It didn't work. So what I did is I reverted back to the basically the original assignment and the tutorial that was provided for us, and I followed the tutorial, and that's what I've got here. Um, but I do want you to understand that just because I did the tutorial doesn't mean that I'm skating by. I really got into depth with this and learned it, and I'll prove that too. So at first I thought this was going to take me about an hour to do. Boy, was I wrong. It took me at least 2 hours to do it because I couldn't get the other one to work. And now that I think about it, I think I might have known what's going on, but I'm going to ask my instructor or my professor before I try to redo it. Hopefully she gives me a good grade though. So anyway, just to start off, so we have a bunch of using statements here. This is basically like our imports from like C++ and stuff. We're using different aspects of the .NET library basically in order to make things work. This namespace here, a namespace is basically a container that encompasses everything that's going to be in this form, right? It's kind of like a container that you put your class in, your functions, and all the data structures that go in with it. Okay, so let's go from the top here. So basically, I have three things here. I have right here. I have a label that says enter your integer. It's just a benign label. It just says that. I have a text box where you can enter an integer, and then you press the button in order to get the result, just like the tutorial that was provided for us. So how this code works is this. When you click on that button, some stuff happens, okay? What you need to do is you need to enter a number, an integer basically, into that text box and press the button, and then you will get some output. So what happens is this. We have two variables here. One is an integer called result. One is a string called str. So the string is basically what we're getting from the text box. Whatever the user types in that text box is going to be stored as a string. Okay. Now the problem with that is we want to get a number. Well, can a number be a string? Yes, but it's treated as a string and not a mathematical property, so to say. For example, if you were to try to add a string called 9 with a string called 8, you would get 98. You wouldn't get 9 plus 8, right? So you would have to use an integer and use an integer of 9 plus an integer of 8. Not a string of 9 plus a string of 8, because you're just going to concatenate it basically. And either you're going to get an error depending on the programming language you're using, or you're going to concatenate it and it'll become one string basically. Not exactly what we want to do. So we have to convert our string into something that we can use, right? So what we want to use is an integer. And in order to make a string back into a number, basically we have to parse it. Parse basically means just that. We're going to take something and try to turn it into something else. So that's what you got here in this if statement. So this if statement is going to try to parse whatever text we put in this text box. The text box is going to store it as a string, and then this try parse is going to try to output it in the integer form called result. if that makes sense. I hope it does, because I can't get any more. I can't get any more like vivid than that. So if that happens, then we create a message box and we show it to the user, and it says this is a valid integer. Okay. If that doesn't happen, if we don't have a string that turns into a number, for instance, you type in the word lion. Well, lion doesn't contain any numbers at all. It is a string. Actually, it could be considered a string literal, right? Right. So you can't parse that into an integer yet. I could probably write a program that does that, but for this intensive purposes, no, that's not going to happen. So we get something else. So if this is not true, if we can't call it an integer, then it's going to say, we're going to print out another message box to the user. It's going to say this is not a valid integer, right? It's common sense. Okay, so that's one way to do exception handling, and it's basic exception handling that's probably in just about every single program that you'll ever see. If statements are essential, basically, in a good program, because it basically allows you to delegate things based on a user's input, right? So, if a user does this, then we're going to do that. Well, if he does something else, then we're going to do this instead, if that makes sense. It's great. It works great up until you figure out that the user's smarter than you are as a programmer, and he or she does something that breaks the program. Okay, so if else statements are good if you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, or you're not worried about a user making a mistake. Okay, I use them all the time. So, but you don't want to throw something out on a professional level that a user can break. So C# has this really cool thing called a try-catch statement. And what that does is right here. So the try-catch statement does this. It says, we're going to try to do this. And if something goes wrong, we're going to try to catch it. And if we catch something that's wrong, we're going to let the user know by doing something. For example, in this one, we're going to try to parse that string, right? So if it doesn't parse, then we know something bad happened. And it's going to kick out into this catch statement, and it's going to say, oh, we caught something. It's not a valid integer. Let's try this again. And that's basically it in layman's terms. And my bird Phoenix agrees. Say hi, Phoenix. Oh, now you're not going to say hi. Okay. Anyway, sorry about that. He's being rude. But anyway, so let's get back to the assignment that I tried to do. So now if you think about this, with this try statement, we basically, again, we tried to parse this string into an integer. Well, with the one I was trying to do, I was basically using nothing but strings. And what you would do is you would enter the name of a band. And if you got it right, if the band was there, then it would say something. If it wasn't, then the else statement would say, oh, that band's not on the label. Well, how do you do that with the try statement? So I tried everything I could. I thought, okay, well, we're going to use an if statement just like that. Well, that didn't work. Okay, well, then we're going to try to compare to see if, if these things are stored. We're going to store it in a string that says, this is what was stored. Well, that didn't work. Well, then let's try to Boolean and see something else. So what I did is I made a Boolean, and I said, if this else statement is triggered, then we're going to set this Boolean to false. And I tried to catch the Boolean in this try statement. Well, that didn't work. Well, I'm out of time, guys. So I couldn't really figure it out because of the time. So I did this instead. And I think this is going to be good enough. I'm sure the professor's going to agree that I pretty much know my stuff with that. But Professor Coddington, if you could chime in later on and let me know what I was doing wrong, that would be great. Anyway, guys, let's take a look at this in action now. So let's start it up. Okay, so here we go. Here's our form. Okay, enter an integer. All right, so let's do the same. Let's do what it says at first and see what happens. Let's enter 76. 76 is an integer, so it'll say this is a valid integer. Okay, so let's enter something else. Let's enter hello. Well, hello is not an integer, and it's not gonna. You can't parse it to an integer, right? So that's not a valid integer. And then it goes into the catch statement. It's not a valid integer. And it says, please try again. So this works. It works great, right? So everything's working. That's awesome. But for what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a list of bands. And you type in the name of the band, and when you press the button, it'll say, something. And if you don't get it right, then it basically does the same thing. Didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, but I understand this. So I think I'm just going to keep plugging away at it and see if I can update it later on. But anyway, guys, this is my assignment, and that is how you use exception handling with C#.